Hi everyone, welcome back to Young and Wifed Up. This is Marcella.
And I'm Gabby.
Thanks for joining us this week for another episode.
Today I want to talk to you quickly about Imperfect Foods. It is an online grocery subscription service. You have no ties, no financial commitments that you have to do every week. Whenever you decide you would like to make an order, you will go and put items in your cart, and it is super, super great. They have incredible food and snack and drinks and baking supplies and all kinds of things that you need for your daily grocery life. I just recently made an order today, and I was able to stock up on my onions and my garlic and some fun creamers that I really like, some dairy-free creamers that I like. And they also have some grass-fed butters that I really like. And then there was one thing that I was really excited to try. I can't remember. I think, pickled onions. They just recently started expanding their pickled and fermented section. So go check that out. And whenever you want to skip a week, you can just skip it and you don't have to make any commitment to buy groceries that week. So super affordable. They're doing great things for our environment and for our planet and for us. So thank you, Imperfect Foods. We have a $25 coupon in our website, youngandwifedup.com. So go and grab that so you can start shopping.
Okay. We are talking about embracing radical femininity. I don't know why my opera.
Why are you singing?
Embracing.
I think it's because we're talking about being feminine, so you're associating
to do
singing
something
with that.
feminine.
I'm scared about this conversation. Let me tell you why. I think it is going to be scary, some of the things that I say.
Oh no.
Well, okay. Let's just go. Let's just go.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if you want to yell at me, you know where my Instagram is. But I just want to say, some of this is just genuinely our opinion. And some of this I do think that we can back up biblically. Because people are going to say femininity is so subjective that there's absolutely nothing objective. And every culture has different ideas and every time period has different ideas. But I genuinely believe in 2023, there are objective things that we need to embrace as Christian women in order to respond to radical feminism. So
why don't you start? Because I think you've thought more about this recently than
So if you want to know what we think about feminism, we have a whole episode about that called We Aren't Feminists. And so go.
If you wonder.
I just told you what I think about it. But either it's a more expansive why we believe it's not compatible with being with having a Christian worldview and XYZ. But the reason I bring that episode up is because when I was thinking about remedies recently for radical feminism, the things that I thought of were getting married, staying home, wearing dresses, and having babies. And those are just super broad. Yeah. I'm wearing sweats right now. Obviously I'm not wearing dresses all the time, but I'm just saying there are things that the world has said are so wrong. Mm-hmm. And so, so for an example, delaying marriage for no reason. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we believe there's obvious reasons why you should delay marriage, or maybe, there's obviously wise things. And, if you're in a good church and you're getting good counsel, I'm sure there'll be people that say, oh yeah, you guys are ready to get married, or you're not ready to get married. But I do think there is an undue delay of marriage that has become so accepted, even in Christian circles.
Yes.
And so the opposite of that is getting married and considering marriage as an option young. as well, and not saying like, well, I need to live my life before I get married and tie myself down. Secondly, abortion and the hatred of babies, and the hatred of motherhood, even. The answer to that is to embrace motherhood, to love children, not just your own, but other people's children. So if your homegirl comes to you and says, I'm pregnant, you're like, like another baby, you know, like the response, the answer should be, wow, praise God. What a blessing to your family. So we have an overall attitude against children. We have an overall attitude against marriage. We have an overall attitude also about women being domesticated. So another reason that we're not feminists is because we do not believe that being a career woman is all that it is cracked up to be. And this is coming from, both of us have been career women, completely career driven. And I am, by the time this episode comes out, will be my last week as a career woman, essentially.
Wow, how fitting.
I know. So this is very fresh for me. And I want to make sure that I'm sensitive, that I understand, as somebody in the first 4.5 years of my marriage worked most of the week and most of my day, that sometimes you can't immediately do that when you first get married, or, you know, the sacrifices that you have to make in order to be a single income household is almost impossible. And so sometimes you have to have a secondary income. So I'm not going to speak to those nuances because we don't have time to go over every nuance. And even I thought for so long that I was a nuance, because the Lord gifted me with the ability and the skills to teach and to be my own boss. So therefore I owe it to myself, to my family, and to the families that I work with to be career minded. So I want to say that I understand the nuances. I understand that times are hard.
There are real legitimate
Marcella and I are moving out of California because living in California on a single income household is very hard. So we understand the nuances. Okay. We understand that there are reasons why domestic life is not an option for some families. I also have people in my life where the husband has a disability or has an issue where he absolutely cannot work, and it is an extraordinary circumstance. So the woman has to work instead. So like, we're not speaking to those extraordinary circumstances. And again, those things should be handled under the counsel of godly elders and their wives and wise people that are older than you. Don't take everything that we say as law, right? But I want to say an overarching hatred and an emphasis for saying that a woman staying at home is not a good vocation. It's not honoring. It's not a worthy call. So that's what the world is pushing. And I see it not just on the internet, but in everyday life, even in conversations that I recently had, telling people that I'm no longer going to be working. The faces and the reactions are so diverse. Like,
yeah, it depends on
who you're talking to. A lot of people are very supportive and understand. Thankfully. But then there's this, well, but you don't have a kid. Like, I'm so confused. Like, what are you going to be doing? Like, you're going to be so bored. Or like, why would you want to stop working? And so there's this just overarching kind of like vibe against domesticity. So in response to that, I think embracing domesticity, considering it, making those sacrifices if your family is able to and your husband is on board to do that, is a radical response to radical feminism. And then also, I want to speak to the wearing dresses comment. Okay, so I'm going to speak for myself because we have a Patreon episode that was kind of early on in our season called Wearing Dresses. And I kind of talk about my journey a little bit more in depth about why I started wearing more dresses. Partly, the biggest thing I think is that as God has changed me inwardly, He's started to change me outwardly and how I present myself to the world. And there is, okay, if we think about transgenderism and men dressing up like women, what do they normally do? They put on makeup. They curl their hair. They grow it long. They put on dresses. They wear high heels. So it's so interesting that like feminism, there's like two sides of the coin, like become a man and look like a man as much as possible. And like, don't dress for the male gaze and don't be so girly and frou-frou. But then those same feminists embrace the men that are putting on a female costume and saying, you're a girl, you're a woman, and affirming them. So our response should be, you cannot put on a costume and become a woman, right? And so that is ours. The ability to wear dresses and to wear makeup is ours. That is something that God has gifted us with, to look more beautiful than a man. And so there are objective things. So in cultures, yes, there are different things in different time periods. Like, I'm not going to wear a prairie dress now because I don't live in the prairie days, right? Yeah. But Gabby, 2023, like, I like to dress more grunge, more dark. You know, I have piercings. I like black. But like, I know when I'm trying to dress more androgynous and not female, and then when I am trying to dress more feminine, I can still be myself. I'm still Gabby. I'm not this prairie or Amish looking lady, you know, but I feel more feminine in those times. So that's kind of like where I want to start off with. So maybe I can kind of ask you some questions to kind of like get more of a conversation going. So what would you say is objective or subjective with femininity? I kind of said a couple of things that I believed. What do you think? Ooh, so maybe like, what do you think is subjective? Like things that are kind of left to the individual on how they present femininity, how they embrace it in their everyday life.
I think, let me think. Subjectively, like you were saying, depending on the culture and time period, there can be like a difference with what might be like specific styles or like types of dress or like specific clothing items that might be considered more feminine or, you know, not as, you know, feminine. I think that can tend to be a little bit subjective, but I agree with what you were saying that like, especially in the past, like 5 to 10 years, I would say, like the trendy styles it has become very androgynous. And so it's like, well, if everybody looks the same, then there isn't really
a distinction.
Yeah, there's no distinction. And it's like the push for equality. If you can wear this, then I can wear that. We just all kind of can exchange clothes with each other, and it doesn't even really matter, which is scary. But yeah, I think that can be subjective. And I'm not talking about like modesty, because I think like that is another thing that I think objectively modesty is feminine, and I think there are good principles that can be applied to style depending on the situation, because there might be it's hard because it's like one clothing item on somebody might be fine, but the same clothing item on another type of body may be immodest. Yeah. So it's like you have to do so much internal checking to see what is my intention for wearing what I'm wearing, why am I wearing it, and it can feel like a lot of work, but that is a whole, like, modesty is a really huge subject to kind of go across. And I think there are definitely cultures, differing cultures and stuff, that we would say, even if for them, those types of dress are very feminine for them, it's what the women wear, it would be very immodest for us to wear. So that is kind of hard. And then I think, obviously, being homemakers, I think, is objective. I don't think that's subjective, even if you are working and you have to work. And again, this is coming from two women who have contributed financially to their household for many years while being married, while having children, all of that stuff. That was never and should not have been the priority. Yeah. It should not have been, I, am working my job because I don't want to lose myself, or I don't want to lose my identity, and this is like giving me something to do and that sort of thing. But it's like, even when you are contributing financially, you are still not exempt from your number one calling, which is to be a homemaker. And sometimes that's hard, especially when we are contributing so much to the financial load of the household, because it's like, well, what about my husband? Like, if we're both working, why can't he has the same responsibility as a homemaker? It's like, no, it still lands on you. Yeah, God, which is a tough pill to swallow.
And ordained a vocation for women.
Yeah, which can be tough, because it's like, well, we're working the same amount of hours, so the load should be equal with the household stuff. And it's like, yes, in a sense of like, if your husband truly wants to be helpful, he's not gonna like get home from work and sit on his butt all day. Right. And like not do anything. But at the same time, it should not push you towards bitterness or resentment, because that is still your duty and responsibility primarily, which is, eventually in the future we want to talk more about that subject. But yeah, definitely being a homemaker. And that does not mean, when you just so happen to be home, that you're just gonna work at home. It's like, how can you work at home if you're never there?
Yeah. What changes need to happen? And again, we had to make this decision.
Yeah, we're literally moving across the country.
Yeah. like we have to make decisions as families of like, what is glorifying God, and how can we, like, I can't do my duty. Yeah. If I'm doing this and I'm still doing and I'm working because my health is bad, and so now all of my energy goes to my job and not to my home. And so when I am home, I'm happy, I feel free, the Lord is blessing me, and I'm like, why am I not seeing the connection? know? So I think that there are definitely objective ways where we truly need to challenge ourselves. And okay, another thing is our temperament. When the scriptures speak about a gentle and quiet spirit, I used to think like, oh, well, that doesn't mean I have to be like quiet or soft spoken, because that's just not my personality, But there is an overall like I used to take so much pride in being a loud woman. Like, hear me roar. I'm gonna voice every opinion I have. Be super obnoxious, or like, not flirtatious isn't the right word, because I don't think I was ever like a flirt, but like being just like center of attention kind of obnoxious behavior. And seeing now, like over the years, like, ew, like that's so like, one, that's just like not a good look, but then two, like I had pride in that because I wanted to be the opposite of a gentle and quiet spirit. So like considering like what are people's perceptions of me? Like, do I say every little thing that comes to my mind? Do I complain constantly about every little thing and my husband and whatever? Or
am I loud and crass and like, am I very sarcastic all the time and nobody really knows if I'm being sarcastic or not?
So there's ways that you can carry yourself.
Yeah, totally.
In addition, like you can look like, I've said this before, you can wear the most beautiful dress, have the most beautiful face and adorn yourself. And the scriptures literally speak to this, that we are not to merely adorn ourselves, because it's still saying we can and we should. Like, it's just not only. We shouldn't only adorn ourselves beautifully, but to have a quiet disposition and have the fear of the Lord. Like, there's those things that are our temperaments, how we carry ourselves, that can genuinely be feminine and like godly, and being a godly woman. And then there's ways where I've seen it myself where I was rejecting femininity. I was rejecting God's plan for me. And so then now I have to reflect and be like, wow, like, you know, I really need to work on these things in myself, because I don't want to be, have this masculine attitude.
Yeah, it is interesting because like Jed and I talk about this all the time. I don't know why this subject always comes up between the two of us, but we always talk about how there can be the most, like objectively, the most beautiful person, man or woman you've ever seen. And it's like, you can say, wow, like they are beautiful or like they are attractive and that sort of thing. But then they like start talking and then it's like, oh no. And it's like, it is so weird because for me personally, it literally changes how I see them. And I'm like, you are not beautiful anymore.
Yeah.
Like the way that you're talking to your husband, the way that you're acting towards your children, the way that like it's almost like the ring in the pig's snout sort of a thing.
Yes.
And it's like, yes, like we should emphasize our physical beauty
yes.
because we are still image bearers, and like we should reflect that beauty. You know, we should want to reflect that beauty outwardly, but it should not be like it that can be ruined so easily.
Yeah.
So easily just by being, like you were saying, like loud, obnoxious, crass, bad attitude, always snipping at people, just like cold, and like all of the, like there are so many things that are not feminine.
Yeah. Well, and obviously people are like, well, what about the guys? And I'm sorry, this is not a podcast for men. So
go find
I'm
somewhere
sure
else to go.
there's a few podcasts we could recommend of if your husband is interested. But
wants to be reprimanded.
But even then, like, I don't even want to say that or do that because I don't want to be involved in that. But either way, so yeah, I know that that's going to be a question and be like, well, you're talking about all the things that women do, but I'm like, this is a podcast for women. I'm not going to talk about, but either way. Okay. So back to like the practical. So how have you yourself embraced femininity more recently, and how do you think it's benefited you and your family?
I think the marriage and motherhood thing, it was a really good kickstart for me. Because there is something about the commitment and responsibility of time that marriage and having children pulls you away from the unnecessary things. It forces you to slow down. It forces you to think about what should actually be my priorities, because when it's just you and yourself, it's kind of easier to let those things infiltrate.
Yeah.
Because you don't have as much of an anchor that a family brings you. And that's not to say, is this impossible if you're single and childless? No.
Of course not. I'll speak to that.
Yeah. But for me personally, if you're asking like what kind of helped push me into that, was definitely getting married and having children was definitely like that is an anchor into my femininity. And because I know what the Lord has called me to, and that these are, like you were saying, worthy vocations, being quote unquote domesticated and like all of that stuff, and just seeing the joy it brings to the people in my home, it is 100% worth it. Even if like, of course, there are days where it is really hard. Everybody is at level 100 and it's just, it's just chaos. And it's like, even in those moments, you can still, have that gentle and quiet spirit we are never on this earth. We are not going to do it perfectly. But if it's like, I have this desire and I want this, and this is, you know, something that I'm striving for, and I know that it's good. I know it's good for me. I know it's good for the people around me. And also just like what has been really inspiring for me and like motivational is when I am acting more feminine, and it's hard to pinpoint like what exactly that could look like for different people, but it's more like my attitude, being respectful, being quick to listen and slow to speak, especially with my husband. When I am acting more that way of like gentle and caring and nurturing, he acts more into his masculinity. And that has been so helpful. There's not this kind of like clashing of personalities and like clashing of attitudes and clashing of, I don't even know what other word to use. I think you guys can kind of get the gist, but like seeing the change in my husband because of my conduct has been like, okay, I need to keep doing this, because obviously like the Lord tells me it's good, and I'm seeing the fruit almost instantaneously. Like it can change the warmth of your home like in a second, just from how the wife and mother is acting in her home. And so just those simple things, it's like we don't realize how much power we have in being feminine and being gentle and being loving and caring. I don't know. It's just like, it is kind of crazy, like how much it can change.
Yeah.
Everybody else
a whole household.
too. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think some practical things for me, I think when I'm thinking back of like where my kind of mindset shift to embracing femininity, it was when I was actually still single, and I was asking the Lord to bring me a husband. And I had decided, because for that couple years before I met Ryan, when I was like following God, just really like dedicated in my faith, I was the one that was initiating and trying to pursue a relationship and like starting the talking or initiating. Like I was doing the catching for whoever I was dating.
Chasing, yeah.
And so when I like saw that just was not working for me, partly because maybe I just had poor choices in men, but like just God humbling me, and showing me that, you know, it's my life is his. When God brought me Ryan and Ryan initiated with me, that is the most feminine thing that has ever happened to me, because almost all of my relationships, I think I initiated, almost all of them. And even some that were like good and not like terrible relationships, but they just didn't work out. Yeah. And so having Ryan pursue me as a single woman was an extremely changing thing for me, because I was like, oh, like this guy like is pursuing me. And so I don't know if there's a single woman, because I know there's a few single women that listen to this. One of the most feminine things you can do as a single woman is not to pursue and do the catching. Now, I'm not saying that if you found your husband and you were the one that initiated it, but I'm just saying as advice, looking back and reflecting, seeing that not work for me as a single woman, and seeing how the Lord just brought this man that was ready to pursue me, that was just like an extremely changing thing for my heart. Another thing is practically changing how I dress myself. And I think part of that is because I had such a distaste for girliness and a distaste for feminine or color or just things like that, that over the last couple years, I've been trying to tap into more of, like, I always say, like, I'm in my Jane Austen era or whatever, that like during the summer, you will not catch me in pants. Like, you just not. Like, I wish I could wear dresses during the winter, but the tights help. You know, we talked about the tights in our favorites episode, but like, it's just, I'm not as comfortable wearing dresses. It's not as practical in the winter. So yeah. But during the summer, I'm just like girly, okay? And just totally embracing it. And it genuinely changes my attitude and disposition, how I dress. even if I'm just going to stay at home, like I have a couple little house dresses for just like cleaning the house. And Ryan is just like loving it when I'm wearing my house dresses. And I'm like, I look grubby still, but it just changes things. I don't know why. I don't know why it has to be a dress, but for some reason, it really does change my mind. And I notice a change and like how I behave when I am tapping more into that feminine side. And then another thing is, being really intentional about how I'm behaving, submitting to my husband.
Yeah.
That is a very feminine thing to do, and God blesses and honors that. And then also just like tapping into the maternal side. So even though I'm not a mother, I was going to speak to that when you were saying, you know, like being feminine, like it's like being a mother is a part of being feminine. But if you are in a waiting period, or if you're single and you're not a mother, you're not married, you know, or you're asking the Lord for a child, he hasn't given you one. There are ways that you can tap into this maternal energy that don't require you having your own physical child yet. So like part of being feminine for me in tapping into the maternal side of that is being a caretaker for others, like physically taking care of people, being there to help them, being somebody that their children, they can trust their children to be with me. That's kind of a way that I kind of tap into that side of femininity. And like having a joyful and positive disposition when my friends and family tell me that they're having children, and just being like encouraging people to have children, and like not being this like, oh, like you're already a number 4, and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, are you sure that's a great idea?
Yeah. And just like having like an overall like content heart. So there are, like we said, there's subjective and objective. Like, I'm not saying that everybody needs to be wearing a dress all the time. Like, I don't think I'm there yet. Maybe catch me in a couple years, I might say I'm a dress onlyist. But I'm just saying, like, at this point in my life, looking out into the world and seeing how femininity is being destroyed, and not just the physical things, but the heart things too. The physical things are still important. And so I think that as a response to seeing the world destroy what is good and beautiful, we should consider taking on those things as a response.
Yeah.
And saying like, the world is saying this is bad, and I'm going to say, God says this is good and beautiful, and I'm going to adopt this into my lifestyle.
To look like a woman and
I'm
to act like a woman. Yeah.
And again, like, I'm not saying that I'm going to be dressing in purple and pink every day, because I don't know if those are objectively feminine colors forever. But in our culture, pink and purple kind of are more feminine. And it's interesting when you see, again, the transgender and the costume of women, you see them adopting pastels into their color palette when a straight man wouldn't.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like, yes, like, even it is subjective.
Even pagans see it.
Yes, it's subjective, but it's not.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such an interesting thing. I just wanted to open the conversation with this, just so that people can consider, we can consider these things of like, why do I hate the color pink? Why do I hate the floral patterns? Like, is it because it's just genuinely not my taste? Or is it because there's a heart issue where I'm like, I do not want to be feminine. I don't want to look girly, you know? And so I guess I've been having those introspective conversations with myself, and I want to kind of invite you into them.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Do you have any other thoughts before we wrap up?
Nope.
Awesome. Okay, thank you guys so much for joining us. This is our last episode for season 4. We love you guys so much with all of our hearts. We can't wait to see you, Lord willing, in a couple months when we're all settled and this is going to look totally different.
Yeah.
But we love you guys so much. Thank you for everything that you've done to support our families, whether it be listening, sharing, supporting on Patreon, whatever you've done. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. We love you guys. Talk to you in a couple months. Bye.
Bye.